This evening's guest is a lifelong Michigan resident as well as a graduate of both Michigan State University and Cooley Law School. He lives in East Lansing and has 4 children, ages 9, 11, 13, and 7. He worked in the Michigan legislature for 15 years for leading free market legislators and served as the state director of Americans for Prosperity Foundation for nearly 7 years. You'll probably remember times he was a guest here with us. He grew the base for Americans for Prosperity from a couple of thousand people to over 100,000. He's appeared on several international, national, state, and local media forums, including television, radio, and print, and he has published viewpoints in several papers across the state. We'd like to thank tonight's guest for making the drive to Lapeer County in this weather tonight. So please join me in a warm welcome for tonight's guest speaker, Mr. Scott Hagerstrom.
Good evening, everyone. Glad some of you came out despite the snow. Hopefully this will be the last hurrah, but I have a feeling it won't be. So we have a decision to make on May 5th. The governor started this quest about 3 years ago. He mentioned in his State of the State address about 3 years ago we need about $1.2 to $1.5 billion more for our roads here in the state of Michigan. And I don't think anyone would dispute, we don't dispute, that our roads need fixing. We need to invest more resources into our roads. But it's a matter of where those dollars come from. Do they come from your pockets in higher taxes, or do they come from state government in rearranging their finances, or maybe a combination of the two? So last year, the legislature, the State House, put forward a plan, about $400 million, rearranging some internal spending, playing around with truck weight fines, and allocating general fund, general purpose dollars, dedicating those to roads. They sent that over to the Senate. The Senate, end of June, right before they broke, took several votes, and they couldn't get anything passed. Of course, it's an election year, and no one likes to raise taxes in an election year. So the election came and went, and the governor, based on what happened last summer in many legislative primaries, Republican districts, conservative Republicans were nominated. And after the November election, they took a look around and said, "Ooh, if we want a tax increase, we need to get it passed now, because come next January, based on the people we see being sworn in to the State House and State Senate, we don't think we can get the amount of tax increases that we need." So they had to push and push very hard. So the Senate acted first. They passed a $1.2 billion tax increase, about 24 cents per gallon tax. That means you'd be paying 24 cents more per gallon for gasoline to get that $1.2 billion. Now, in retrospect, when we look at that, at the time, didn't support that. I still don't support that. But what we have now on the ballot, that $1.2 billion tax increase looks awfully good. So the House kicked it over to the House, and the House passed a plan where they took future revenue growth, and they gradually, over 6 years, dedicated that to the roads. Speaker Bolger put this plan forward. You may know we have one of the highest taxes on gasoline in the country, with the 19 cents per gallon. This is at the state level, and then 6%. However, that 6%, hardly any of that goes to roads. About 40%, currently about 40% of the taxes you pay at the pump don't even go to roads. Part of that stems from Proposal A, that dedicated certain sales tax revenue to schools, local governments, and general fund. So the Speaker of the House put forward a plan, moved the 19 cents to a wholesale tax, a percentage, and then gradually took the sales tax off gasoline, but at the same time, a penny would come off the sales tax, a penny would go on the wholesale tax. And over 6 years, there'd be no sales tax on gas, and that 6% was transferred over to the wholesale tax. So gradually moving all the money that you pay at the pump to go to roads. Part of their plan, too, is this didn't put it into Act 51. This put all the new money into fixing roads, so you didn't siphon off 9 or 10% for mass transit across the state. Now, the education lobby was not happy because they were planning on X growth, and they said, well, you're cutting us. Well, they're not really, government speak they're cutting, but they weren't really cutting. They're cutting the rate of growth. It was still going to grow above the rate of inflation. So education and local, actually what it did is said as a priority, we're going to prioritize public education, local government, and roads. But we're going to take future revenue growth and say those are our 3 top priorities. So the House passed this plan. Speaker Bolger wrote a great opinion piece in the Detroit Free Press on December 12th defending the plan. It's a credible plan to move over $1 billion towards roads over a 6-year period, and then after the 6 years, it would be permanently over $1 billion going to roads. You may want to know, currently in the current fiscal year, we're spending $3.7 billion in the Department of Transportation. About 80% of that's actually going to roads. About 6.5% actually goes on debt service on bonds. So only in state government, and you may have already know this, the Senate passes a plan at $1.2 billion. The House passes a plan at 0. Both eventually accomplish the goal of moving $1.2 billion into transportation, into fixing roads. But only in state government do they send that to conference committee, and what comes out is a $2 billion tax increase. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever dickered and dealed and bought a used vehicle or a car or a lawnmower. Usually, they're asking X, and you come in at X, and then somewhere you find a happy medium, middle ground. So their compromise with the $1.2 billion tax increase and a 0 tax increase was a $2 billion tax increase. And I'll get into this in a few minutes, but could be much higher than $2 billion. There's still a lot of unknowns with this proposal. So that's sort of how we got to where we are right now over the past 3 years. Like I said, we're spending $3.7 billion in the Department of Transportation budget. Next year, the proposed budget, I believe, from Snyder is about $3.65 billion, about $50 million less. So if this is voted down, there's still billions of dollars there that are being spent to fix our roads. It's not like they're just going to stop. It's not like money isn't going to go to roads. So this proposal has $1.2 to $1.4 billion for a sales tax increase. Now, a lot of different figures out there floating around because there's a lot of different economists, a lot of different estimates on where our economy is going. So you're going to hear a lot of numbers floating around. A lot of these are estimates, best guesses. So sales tax, 6 to 7%. The other side's going to say, well, that's just a penny more. It's actually a 16.6% increase in sales tax, in what the people of Michigan are paying in sales tax. They'll result immediately in $1.2 to $1.4 billion more in revenue. Then they take the sales tax off of gasoline, so you won't be paying sales tax anymore on gasoline. And they apply a new tax to gasoline, a flat 41.7 cent per gallon tax. That would take, if this passes, that would take effect October 1st. So what are we paying right now in gas taxes? We're paying 19 cents plus 6%. This is at the state level. So if gas is $2.12 a gallon, you're paying $2, and then the 12 cents is your 6% sales tax. If you're paying $2.25, $2.30 a gallon, you're probably paying about 13 cents in sales tax. Or what's the price right now? About $2.45, I think I saw. So you might be paying close to 14 cents a gallon in sales tax. Plus, so add that to 19 cents, and that's 33 cents a gallon. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt with a little better numbers. So 33 cents a gallon. based on the current price. If this passes, the tax will be 41.7. So that's an 8.7 cent per gallon tax increase. That is a floor. It will never go beneath that ever again. In fact, it will be inflation adjusted forevermore based on the price of gasoline. It's a very complicated formula. I was talking to James Holman from the Mackinac Center, who studies these things full time, and he was trying to wade his way through it and trying to figure out exactly what it meant. But I think his bottom line assessment, what he told me, was this will actually allow them to increase the tax on gasoline slightly above the rate of inflation every year forevermore. It's some odd formula with the consumer price index, the price of gas, and every time it goes up and ratchets up, that's the new floor and can never go down again. So right now they're starting with gas prices pretty low. It can ratchet up over time, so maybe gas gets back up to $4 or $5 a gallon and then drops again to $2.50. The tax won't drop correspondingly. So you could see a situation, my understanding from the formula, it can't go up more than 5 cents per year, the tax. Now, if we have some higher inflation and higher gas prices increases, theoretically, the tax could go up 5 cents a year. Not likely, but you can see over time, within 10 years, that 41.7 cent tax could theoretically be 91.7 cents. It just keeps ratcheting up. Registration fees. They're referred in statute as taxes, some places as fees, but these are annual vehicle fees. They're going to collect an extra $95 million a year immediately because of these increased vehicle registration fees. About $50 million is on trucks, $45 million immediately from the public on your cars. Now, how many people have ever bought a new car? You get a 10%, you get your plates, it's placed on the value. In each of the first 3 years, it goes down 10%. And then it freezes, and then that's what's paid forevermore. Well, Senator Randy Richardville, who was the Senate Majority Leader at the time, said this was not a tax increase, they were just doing away with the discount. Because Lansing has been so kind these past 30 years to give all of you a discount. So now, when you initially look at that, you think, oh, well, that's just going to affect people that buy new cars. Well, yeah, but then when you buy a new car and you get that 10% discount each of the 3 years, and in 5 years you sell it as a used car, whoever buys the car used is also going to be paying that higher registration taxes that first year instead of the step-down decrease from the third year. So this is going to have an effect as the years go on and prices go up, collect more and more money. In fact, the House Fiscal Agency estimates by 2030, this is not only going to be a $95 million hit to the public, it's going to be a $210 million hit. So that's also gradually ratcheting up. Patrick Anderson, who worked for Dick Headley as a respected economist in Lansing, recently did a study. I know, how many people itemize on your taxes? Okay. Currently, if you had an ad valorem tax, meaning it's based on the value, you can deduct, you can itemize your car registration fees. Michigan residents claim about $400 million a year in car registration fees, meaning that they send $100 million less to Washington, D.C. because they're able to itemize their car registration, annual car registration taxes. Patrick Anderson he looked at this, and according to his analysis, the way they changed it and worded it, they went from an ad valorem to an excise tax, meaning you're no longer going to be able to deduct your car registration fees on your federal taxes, which will mean that Michigan residents will send an extra $100 million a year to Washington, D.C. So you have about the 1.2 to 1.4. You have about $450 million more from the increase in the gas tax. And these are House Fiscal Agency figures. $95 million more from the registration fees immediately. Part of what the House Fiscal Agency did, they also passed a law to increase the ability to collect sales tax on the internet. That's about another $60 million. That's the only piece of legislation that will go into effect no matter what happens on May 5th. House Fiscal Agency puts that about 1.945 in new revenue, not $1.945 billion. Add on top of that the extra $100 million you're going to pay in taxes to Washington, D.C. Plus, this is sort of the gift that keeps on giving. I guess you have to pass it and vote for it before you know what's in it. The way it was worded, it only exempts gasoline sales for those vehicles that are driven on public roads. So think about that a minute. Our snowmobiles, ATVs, boats, agricultural equipment, industrial equipment, lawnmowers, snow blowers. Now, there may be some practical problems if you go to the gas station, and, how do they know, you're filling up your car versus just a gas container for that vehicle that doesn't go on a public road. But if you leave it up to government, I'm sure they'll find a way if they can extract some more dollars. So this only exempts vehicles on public roads. So we don't know. No one's done an estimate of how much extra dollars a year. Airplanes would be another one, too, where they could charge that extra 7% on top of the 41.7-cent initial tax. No one's done an estimate to know how much this would add up to. I'm sure it's in the millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. So just one more little surprise because they did this. I think someone told me, Bolshevik said, nothing good ever happens after midnight. They went in session on December 18th at 10 a.m., and they went out of session the next morning, Friday morning, about 5 a.m. So those are the tax increases. Those are the tax increases. Well, guess what? The first year this is implemented, less than 25% will actually go to fix roads. About $400 million. It's actually more like 20%. So where's all the other money go? About $800 million is going to go to pay off bonds that have been accumulating over the past 20 years in the Department of Transportation to fix roads. Now, that's nice to pay down debt, but there's nothing in this legislation that prevents them from turning around the very next year and issuing more debt. Now, by year 3 and 4, once fully implemented, according to the Mackinac Center, 62% will go to roads. So that means 38%, nearly 40% of this new $2 billion in taxes won't even go towards road repair. So where does it go? Well, about 110 to 130 million more for mass transit. 260 million for the earned income tax credit. Does everyone know what that is? I call it welfare by another name, because it uses the tax code to distribute dollars to low-income families. Snyder tried to do away with the earned income tax credit back in 2011 to pay for some of his other tax cuts. It's 20% of the federal level. He lowered it to 6% of the federal level. Now this would take it back to 20%. $260 million price tag. Basically, if you're a low-income family and maybe you pay $100 a year in income taxes, not only can you get that $100 back, but you could get a check back from the government for a couple $100. So they're distributing income or dollars to low-income people through the tax code. It's another way to distribute welfare or payments, assistance, redistribution of wealth, because somebody has to earn that money that they're paying back to these people, and that would be the rest of us here in the state. So when you add up these different things, there's about 200 to 300 million more for education. I think the first year about 450 million more for general fund, general purpose, but once fully implemented, about 173 million. That's just sort of a slush fund for legislators to decide how they want to spend it. 40 million for at-risk students. It's really a hodgepodge. It's sort of like a Christmas tree. They needed Democratic votes to get this passed, and basically they said, what do you want? We'll give it to you. Just, we need your yes vote to get this on the ballot. And that's what they did. So So when you look at the budget, you sort of say, well, what? They left so much on the table. They left so much on the table. Roads are very important, and they should be fixed. The total state budget when Snyder took office was a little over $46 billion. The one he just proposed, I believe, is over $54 billion, or right around that area, growing faster than the rate of inflation. If you look back 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I like to use 1967 because that's when they implemented the state income tax. Any period to look at, spending has gone up way faster than the rate of inflation. Now, figures from the Census Bureau show clearly, at least since 2000, Michigan families' incomes have not kept up with the rate of inflation. But spending by state government has exceeded. In fact, over the past 10 years, spending has gone up 50% greater than the rate of inflation. About 30%, and the rate of inflation was 19%. So a simple solution, if roads were so important and should have been a priority, would just merely freeze all of state government spending at a rate of inflation and take the extra revenue under the current tax system and devote it to roads, would be one solution. In fact, there's legislators looking now at several solutions. There's an A, B, C, D, E, and F alternate solutions out there, and many more legislators see this as a real chance that this is going to be defeated, and they need to have a solution ready. So Mackinac Center, again, has done great research. You ever hear about benefits in the balance? Basically, a study they did that said if the average public sector worker had the same benefit package as an average private sector worker, here in the state and local level, we could save over $5 billion a year. Prevailing wage repeal. Mackinac Center study a few years ago and a Patrick Anderson study just 2 years ago, $230 million in savings. Hollywood studios, subsidies, $50 million in savings. We have the MEDC, Economic Development Corporation, that picks winners and losers. Their budget's about $250 million a year. Over 40 states have a part-time legislature. Michigan has a full-time legislature. We could easily cut their budget in half. They spend over $125 million a year. Could easily save $60 million a year right there. There's more. The Mackinac Center has a whole list. I just wanted to give you a flavor of what's out there. There's also been some one-time spending. They just voted last year for the senators to get a new office building, $70 million in bonding. They're talking about a Capitol Visitor Center. The Capitol on the west side is parking for legislators. What they want to do is turn that top level where there's parking into a park, the basement under that into a visitor center, and the second and third basements into parking for legislators and staff with tunnels that go to their office towers, so they don't have to walk out. I don't know if it's because of the weather or they just don't want to run into certain activists. I don't know. So one that really gets me is last summer it was reported that they spent $3.1 million on capital improvements. One was to get all the legislators new chairs, because apparently the chairs they had were there from 1994, about 20 years old. You know, you hear of these legislators, you always hear the time they spent all night in session, but the average amount of time, they're in session about 90 to 100 days a year, in average 30 minutes to an hour in session. So those chairs barely get used. And I don't know about you, but I have chairs in my house that are way older than 20 years. And this is about priorities. One other thing that they spent money on, part of that $3.1 million, is they're matching the pH level of the grass on the Capitol lawn to the maple trees. So I know it's not a lot, but maybe you can, when you throw big figures out there, it's hard to relate to. But once you drill down and see how this money is actually being spent, I mean, these legislators are the fourth highest paid in the country. And most of them are very good people. But, you know, roads should be a priority. They should be a priority. So there's a lot of things on the table that they didn't look at, that they weren't willing to look at. And a lot of those legislators were termed out. The leaders are gone. We have new leadership now, many new legislators. And we firmly believe that the leaders can lead, the legislators can legislate, and if the voters turn this down May 5th, come May 6th, there's already many alternate proposals out there, they can tackle this problem. Firmly believe that we shouldn't have to pay 40% ransom to special interest to get our roads fixed. This is just, I think anything we can agree on that. Even Mitch Albom, are you guys familiar with Mitch Albom? I mean, he's pretty, I mean, I don't know how many people in this room would agree with this, because I don't necessarily agree with it, but he says any dollar spent on education is a good dollar. But this plan is bad because it mixes all these issues together. Why can't we just separate them? Let's just have a roads proposal. If we're going to talk more money for education, let's talk about the merits of that. Let's not throw them in all together. It's interesting when Frank Beckman and Mitch Albom agree to vote no on a proposal. Even U.S. Senator Gary Peters is leaning a strong no, and Mayor Verge Bonero has had trouble with this. And the head of the Michigan Federation of Teachers in Detroit, who was just elected, Steve Kahn, is opposed to this because of how regressive the sales tax is. So this is the proposal that we have. I like to look at it three things. What's it mean for an individual? Estimates are between $170 and $200 per person. That's between $680 and $800 for a family of 4. That's every year. The average wage in Michigan is about $21.42 an hour. For that person, just at the $170 rate on the low end, they have to work an extra 8 hours a year just to pay for this one tax increase. So it's not just a penny. It's much more than a penny. It adds up over the year. Adds up to a lot. Families are struggling. Incomes are not going up. And I think this is the last thing our economy needs, is take a $2 billion out of the private economy, siphon it through Lansing, pay a 40% ransom to special interest, so the rest of the money can go to fix our roads. Now that's what they say, fix our roads, but we also have some other evidence on the table that shows, will that actually happen? Sunday, January 4th, the Free Press ran a front page article detailing concrete at Metro Airport was falling apart way before it was supposed to. So why is this happening? The article also detailed concrete on a couple local highways in Metro Detroit is falling apart way earlier than it was supposed to. So I think those are issues that we need to look at. The legislature needs to have hearings. They say, well, this package of bills expands the use of warranties. An audit report just came out from the Auditor General's office about 2 weeks ago showing that currently they are failing in following up with warranties and holding contractors accountable. So you can pass a law. It's just like with Obamacare. You can have an insurance card. It doesn't mean you have insurance. You can require someone to have a warranty. But if the work isn't being done to follow up to make sure that certain people are held accountable for the work that they've done, what good is it? So these are a lot of issues that need to be looked at. Other people say there's no money. There's no money. Well, because there's the general fund, and then you got statutory requirements. When they pass the cigarette tax, they pass a law saying, well, all that money has to go to X. So that's off. We can't touch that money. Well, there's certain dollars that constitutionally have to go a certain place. Like sales tax revenue has to go to a certain place. But there can be creative solutions by this, as I said with Speaker Bolger's plan, when he said, let's do away with the sales tax on gas and then have a wholesale tax. The consumer will see no difference at the pump, but by making a different type of tax, then it's not under that constitutional constraint. Whenever people also mention, well, we have all this restricted revenue, statutory, constitutional, they sort of portray that they can't do anything about it. Well, we have a constitutional limit that sales tax cannot go over 6 cents, and they have to go to you, the people, to get your permission to go to 7 cents. So it's okay that they go to you, and you're being asked, the people of Michigan are being asked to readjust your family budget to the tune of $680 to $800 every single year. But in doing so, you have to rearrange your finances so Lansing doesn't have to. If they can ask you to amend the Constitution, they can also ask you to amend the Constitution to free up some of these restricted revenues. They can change the law to change some of the statutory restricted revenues. So there's things that they can do to rearrange. So when they say restricted revenues, that's an argument that you need to throw back on them and say, you can deal with that, and if you come up with a solution regarding constitutional restricted revenues, come to us. I think the public, I've been all around the state. I've been traveling the whole state, speaking on this issue, for 3 years now. And roads are definitely a priority. And just like your family budget, if you get a leak in the roof, sometimes you have to move things around. There's a lot of proposals on the table. I could probably just go on, but I'd love to hear your questions and answer them however I can. And I have a couple. Do you want to put I want to put our website up. This is Paul Mitchell started the Coalition Against Higher Taxes and Special Interest Deals. And this is our website. A lot of great information on there. You can watch his off-the-record interview. You can get a lot of great information on here. Our first mailer that we did, handed out here. We have buttons. And then if we could go to the ad. We've already run an ad on television. So, say no to higher taxes. Go to our Facebook page, like it, share the video, view it, share it with friends. What polling is showing is that the more people learn, the more people don't like this. So our goal is to educate as many people as possible and get you to educate as many people as possible, and then make sure people get out to vote. This is a May election. And I'm not, there's polls out there saying this maybe doesn't have a chance. But they're going to target their voters and make sure they get out to vote. So we can't assume it's going to lose. And this is also a great issue for people in the Tea Party. This is an issue you can agree with Democrats and even moderates with. I mean, this is really what we're all about. The other side talks about investing. And that's a code word for more taxes and bigger government. But we believe in investment. We believe that because you earned your money, you should be able to invest it in your family and your community how you see fit, not how politicians and bureaucrats in the Capitol see fit, whether it be Lansing or Washington, D.C. Because we believe that's the way to a better life. To require people to take responsibility for their life, but also to be able to keep and reap the benefits of their hard work. Now I want to go to the ballot language. So you get a 100-word summary. The secretary, or a director of elections in the Secretary of State's office determines what the 100 words are, and it's voted on by the Board of Canvassers. This was just determined last week. So this is what people will see on the ballot. You have a header, which is where you see Proposal 15.1. Right underneath that paragraph is sort of just a description. The actual 100 words is after the proposed constitutional amendment would, and the bullet points. So this is sort of a mixed bag. Go back up to the description. This really matters because, as you know, a lot of people maybe don't pay attention. They know there's an election. They show up. They've been hearing a lot of things. But when they actually get in the voting booth and they read this, it can, if they're not sure, it can really sway them one way or another. Now, it does mention a proposal to amend the state constitution to increase the sales use tax from 6 to 7%, which was absolutely vital. That's the whole reason that we're voting on this. That's the whole reason that this is on the ballot. What was troubling to us, go to just the bullet points. This is the legally required part, these bullet points. The proposed constitutional amendment would, nowhere in this required language does it say that you're amending the Constitution to increase the sales tax from 6 to 7%. The whole reason that you're showing up to vote. It does mention, I testified, we were very adamant that this is the whole reason people are voting. It should be the very first bullet. Now, look at that first bullet. Eliminate sales and use tax on gasoline. We also believe that should have said replace. Eliminate and replace. So you can think that, you guys are very informed. You read about this stuff. You've been interested in politics. You follow this. So you think, oh, it's eliminating taxes. Oh, and the second bullet, more money for school aid, for education. Polling shows, no matter what you think in this room, polling shows people like education spending. Expand use of school aid fund for community colleges and career and technical education. And then you get down to the sub-bullets, because if this is voted in, this constitutional amendment, there are 10 laws that will take effect. If this is voted down, those 10 laws will not take effect. So it says increase sales use tax to 7% as authorized by constitutional amendment. It doesn't say this constitutional amendment. They make it sound like there's some arbitrary constitutional amendment over here that was adopted that authorizes us to do this. Will you give us permission? But nowhere in this language does it say this is actually what you're voting on in this legally required portion. And you could say that's semantics because it's in the description up above. But when you look at election psychology, a lot of times people are just attracted to the bullets. They just read the bullet points. They might see that paragraph and just skim down to the bullets. You just don't know. And then the next bullet, increase gasoline diesel fuel tax and adjust annually for inflation. Now, if you're a voter, don't you say, it said eliminate taxes on gasoline and diesel. What's going on here? Expand competitive bidding and warranties for road projects. Well, they can do that already. And I understand legislators have already requested legislation to take up to do that no matter what. And then increase the earned income tax credit. And do you think most of the public knows what the earned income tax credit is? So that's the language we have. That's the language people are going to see. But we need to make sure that people are educated at what this really is. And it's a $2 billion tax increase. $2 billion tax increase with 40% going to special interest as ransom to pay to fix our roads. So with that, I'd love to open it up to questions.
If you guys don't mind, if you keep your questions warm for us, I'm going to have Josh Klein come up from Representative Courser's office for a brief update, and then we'll get right back into the Q&A, okay? Thanks, Scott.
I will try to keep it brief. I know you guys all want to go home, but this is the first update that we've given since Todd has taken office. It was a slow first month, but things are definitely picking up. This last week was a very heavy week for legislation. We actually passed a lot of gun bills through the State House. We passed some bills that would change some definitions of air and pneumatic guns to get rid of that so that they're not classified the same as other guns, giving you more freedom. SB 3.4 and 3.5, Mike Green has been trying to pass those now for God knows how long, and the governor keeps vetoing. They passed the Senate, they passed the House overwhelmingly. They are going to the governor's desk as we speak, and he'll have 14 days to figure out what he wants to do, and hopefully he doesn't veto it for a third time. In addition to some gun legislation, Todd has introduced 3 bills. One of them, and his first bill that we introduced, is House Bill 4174. If if you want to write that down. That is to eliminate any funds coming from the Michigan Strategic Fund to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. That is, I don't know if this bill will ever see the light of day. I hope it does, that we can start to save the $300 to $500 million every year that the MEDC hands out to pick winners and losers. I'm sure you guys have all heard by now the $500 million budget shortfall that we have this year. Well, thankfully, or you can thank Jennifer Granholm and her mega credits and the MEDC for getting us in this hole in the first place. They are tax credits that were given to corporations. If they met certain criteria, they could cash them in at a later date. Unfortunately, there is no threshold or sunset on those, so whenever they get to that point where they feel that they've met that criteria, they can turn them in. So guess what? Companies, the good news is the economy is getting better. The bad news is these companies have decided they're going to start turning them in, but we have no idea how much and how much they're on the hook for. So it's $500 million that we know of, but that's only what we know of as of June 1st of this year. So the number could actually be bigger. So our state budget deficit could actually be bigger than $500 million. In addition, the House Fiscal and Senate Fiscal agencies, I think it was last week, announced that the number that they're estimating for the total number of money that we could be on the hook for is $9.2 billion in tax credits. So the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader are scrambling to try to figure out, A, how in the heck did this happen in the first place, and B, what can we do to curtail that in the future. I don't know what is going to happen from that point on, but basically Todd has decided that let's get started with eliminating corporate welfare, and that's hopefully what House Bill 4174 will do. Actually, it's 4194. 4174 is another bill that Todd introduced. We are all about free markets. I believe that it is up to the individual company and business to decide if they want to get into business. And I don't know if you guys know this, but your beer and wine sales are actually restricted in a 3-tier licensing system from the top, a middleman, and basically the producer. Well, it's all controlled, and it has been controlled since Prohibition, and they have a very, very powerful lobby, and Todd has introduced a bill that would hopefully repeal the 3-tier licensing system and allow a more free market approach to our beer and wine sales, which is a fantastic thing because Michigan is in the top 5 states for craft breweries in the country. So you'll see Todd try to do as many free market and fiscal bills as possible. Currently, he's voted on 23 bills. He's only voted no on 3. And I think the 2 most important bills he did vote no on were the presidential primary, moving the date of the presidential primary. One of the reasons that was a huge, I wish we would have passed it, but it passed the House. That would have stopped the presidential primary from being moved into March, which would have then forced the state parties, the Democrat and the Republicans, to decide to host their own primary or caucus. Todd is a firm believer that we need to get the government out of paying for a private entity's own organizational nomination. So upcoming this next week, we're still fighting House Bill 4006. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what House Bill 4006 is, but Todd has been leading the charge in the House. It is a bill that allows in emergency situations, with law enforcement approval, to ping your cell phone for its location. This basically is called the Kelsey Smith Act in 2007. A girl in Kansas was basically kidnapped. They tried to locate her. They really couldn't. So her mother has been on this mission for the last 7-8 years to get these laws passed from state to state. Currently, federally, it's legal. If the FBI decides that there's an emergency situation, they need to ping your cell phone, they get the permission, cell phone carrier does it. In the state, it's basically wild, wild west. So this bill has been stopped twice. It made it out of committee, and we have issued amendments to the bill, which has basically kind of stopped it. So currently, again, for the 4th day in a row, it's supposed to come up for a vote, and it got stopped. We have an amendment that Todd put forward granting a mandatory warrant. I think you should all be protected with the warrant, but a requirement by the cell phone user to grant permission. So there's only 2 options that we're trying to allow this bill to be passed, either by user or a warrant. So that's the legislative update for now. I'm sure it's going to get even more busy. Scott handled all the important stuff with the road tax. So any questions, come see me afterward. Email us at the office or give us a call. We'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thanks. So is everyone ready to vote yes on May 5th? I'd like to pass this around. We really need your help. If you want to sign, put your name down if there's something you're willing to do. We really need your help because the governor they've already raised $3.2 million. They're looking to raise 10 to 15 million. Our side right now is trying to raise money, but certainly not as well funded and doesn't have the bully pulpit that the governor has. And this really is just an education campaign and a get out the vote. Any questions? Yes.
If this passes, would the Headley Amendment eventually have any effect on rolling it back like it does property taxes and special voted issues today?
Yeah, on the state level, we're several $billions below the Headley limitation. So if this passed, we wouldn't come close to that limitation, so it probably wouldn't roll anything back. I think the practical effect of this passing, besides costing Michigan families and businesses an extra $2 billion a year and sending more money through Lansing, is instead of forcing Lansing to prioritize spending, I think when they run into another problem, they'll see this as a signal from voters that they're okay with tax increases, and you'll be looking down the barrel of more tax increases. Maybe my guess would be within 2 years. There's several issues mentioned. One, these mega tax credits, they're looking at $400 to $500 to $600 million a year through 2030. There's also rumblings around town that they're dealing with some Medicaid issues, and they're going to be coming up with some shortfalls because we have to start doing our Medicaid match, I believe, as soon as 2017. So long term, there's some major issues that they have to deal with. And if they can grow budget faster than the rate of inflation, but then go to you when they want money for roads, I think they'll just be right back at the well again for a tax increase within 2 years if this passes. So I think from that perspective, it's very important. It sends a message that we want you to reprioritize your spending. And if you come to us for a tax increase, it needs to be very narrow. It needs to go to a specific purpose, and it needs to be as small as possible. And we also have to have the confidence that you're running the department as efficiently as possible. I mean, the audit report that came out 2 weeks ago was pretty bad on the Department of Transportation. Oh yeah, this is for the Coalition Against Higher Taxes and Special Interest Deals. And we're looking for people just to help out. We may be doing phone banks or asking people to get on social media. We only have about 8 weeks. And we're not going to have the millions of dollars that the governor has to get this passed. The road builders put in $2.2 million. They raised $3.2 million in their first filing just about a week or two ago, and they're looking to raise $10 to $15 million. So we really have a public information campaign that we need to run, and we need as many people out there educating people. We can send materials to that you can share, and go to the website, and I'll be glad to hand out my phone number if anyone needs to call for information. Volunteer or people that are willing to help on social media. Yes. Yes. And we're looking for donations too, even if it's just 5, 10, 15, 20 bucks. Anything that you can send in would be great.
That yes and no that you had up there was that a ballot? So really, in a sense, when we go to the voting booth, you're going to see a yes and no at the bottom?
Yes.
Only one time a yes and no, or is there going to be 3 or 4 yes or no's?
This is just one issue. Now, you may have other things on the ballot locally, but as far as this package, you don't get to vote on those 10 bills. It's one yes or one no. Now, whether there's different ballots connecting the 2 lines, I think is the most common one, but this is the language that was approved by the Board of Canvassers just last week on Thursday afternoon. This is the language that you and other voters will see across the whole state. And you can get to vote no or yes. You choose.
Proposal. But you see what the deal was is that I assumed if I would have went there in that booth that it was going to be a tax increase across with 3 different ideas of getting the money. But you see, that's a variable. If I didn't show up tonight, that's where.
Yeah, you just get one choice.
Yeah, so you didn't know that. Thank you.
They could come up with a solution that doesn't require approval from the public. What the Senate passed last year, the $1.2 billion, 24 cent per gallon, did not require a vote of the people. If the House took it up and passed it, the governor would have signed it. So they could come up with a... If this passes, the revenues really don't start coming into October 1st. So if people say this is our last chance to fix roads this year, no, that's not true. We have new leaders in the House and the Senate, very capable, new members in the House and the Senate. They are committed to putting more money into roads. And there's several proposals out there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a small tax increase, but I can tell you the closer we get to next year's election, the appetite for tax increases goes down drastically. That's part of the education campaign that we need to do, that everyone in this room needs to do. When you tell people you're going to pay 40% ransom to special interests to get your roads fixed, vote no, tell the legislature no, tell them to go back to the drawing board. That's our job, that's your job. I'm assuming everyone in here opposes it, but maybe that's the wrong assumption. Go ahead.
You know, they're having this on May 5th. That seems awful lot.
I'm sorry?
Say they're having this election or vote on May 5th. That seems awful odd, that date. It's more like a school board election. People aren't going to be aware that this thing's coming down. And I noticed none of your literature here has the date on it. And this has got to be drilled into these citizens' head.
Yep.
Because there's so many unions, school teachers, public unions are all going to vote for this. So we got a big task here.
Yep.
And this has got to be drilled, and there's a lot of dumb people, too, that just, you know, that vote for this.
Well, I think there's a lot of very busy people that we need to remind constantly. And, no, I appreciate your comments. We'll be coming out with more mail pieces, more TV advertisements. But that's something we should definitely integrate into all our messaging. Vote no on May 5th. Absentees can go out as soon as March 23rd. Estimate somewhere between 35 and maybe one political expert in Lansing believes it could be as high as 45% vote absentee. So March 23rd is right around the corner. We need to really get out there and educate people.
Scott, one thing people don't realize, this is 10 bills that are already signed by the governor, correct? Mm-hmm. And I've heard him, and maybe I'm wrong, but I've heard that the actual laws, the legal part of this thing, is 46,000 pages. Is that? I mean, we had years. Some of you folks have been around a while. Remember, we had the health care bill, the monstrosity. It was like a box of paper size high at 2,000. So multiply that by 23, and you've got what, you know. I mean, this is just amazing to me that this has gone on, and we had Republicans that pushed this thing through. I mean, is there a point of what would you recommend the average person, you know, aside from getting on board with and signing up and seeing what we do on social media, what can we do? What do you think? You've been around this a long time. What is the number one thing that we can do to help get the word out? Just start with family, or start with who, you know, to help educate people.
Family and friends, word of mouth. If you're willing to pass out literature, give us a call, let us know. We'll be glad to send you some. Wear a button. Wear it on your coat. If you're at the grocery store out and about and someone say, oh yeah, I've been hearing about that, be a source of information. And approach this. What's beautiful about this issue is we don't need to be in people's faces. We just say, hey, it's about a $2 billion tax increase to fix the roads, but over 40% doesn't even go to fix roads. Or about 40% doesn't even go to fix roads, even after fully implemented. Tell them the budget's been going up faster than rate of inflation. This will affect the average family. It'd be between $680 and $800 tax increase. So be that ambassador to educate people, friends, family, neighbors. You are an expert. But the beauty of this issue is we don't have to be in people's faces and argue. You just tell them what it is. Polling shows, several polls have been done. The more they learn, the more they lean no. It's just a bad deal. And with with your more moderate or liberal people, it's a very regressive tax. It hits poor people the worst. People that are working and trying to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and trying, and here they get hit by a tax that they have, it falls disproportionately on them. So we can be the good guys to deliver a message and a reason we should vote no, and I think that's very important. So it's not a sexy issue, but you know, two things. One, this comes right after tax season to our advantage. Two, this comes right during pothole season to our disadvantage. So, I mean, this is very, very important. I think long-term ramifications, when there were the two recalls, when the two state senators were recalled in 1983 and the state Senate went to the Republicans have controlled ever since. They were afraid to take up tax increases for a long time because of the ramifications. So we need to send a very important message on May 5th, a resounding no, to defeat this and tell them they need to prioritize their spending, go back to the drawing board.
Scott, I might sound a little dumb for not knowing this, but we talked a little bit about net neutrality tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And then in some of the literature I have, it talks about in Proposition 1 how the newly passed law will soon require Michigan's sales tax to be collected on the internet as well. Is the net neutrality and that part of it connected, or is that two separate issues? I understand the net neutrality's functions, but is it also a tax, and are they the same?
No, they're two different issues. Net neutrality deals with who controls the internet. In the Obama administration, the FCC just voted to basically treat the net like a public utility. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think the internet was broken to begin with. It's working. It's the government stayed out of it, so just stay away from it. That's what they chose not to do that. It's very scary. Internet sales tax. Basically, when you buy something online, you're obliged as the consumer to pay a 6% sales tax. If they don't collect it from you when you fill out your state income taxes, you're supposed to fill that out. There's a feeling in Lansing and other parts of the country that consumers aren't doing that. And so they're losing, they characterize it as losing out in as much as several $100 million in Michigan alone in revenue. So some of the bigger retailers collect it. Basically, there's over 12 or 1,300 jurisdictions that collect sales tax. So if you're a small guy and you're just operating on your home, that can be very cumbersome. The Supreme Court has said there has to be a nexus. You actually have to have a location, a physical location in that state, and you have to establish this nexus to be able to be forced to collect the sales tax. So what they did is they passed a law to provide the Department of Treasury additional tools and strengthen their hand in collecting the sales tax. They estimate they'll collect an extra $60 million a year, and they said this is about fairness. There's some retailers like Marshall Music and others that say, you know, people come in and test the guitar out or sit in the chair, and then they go online, they write the model down, they go online, find the cheapest version online, and they get it, and they don't have to pay sales tax, and by the way, it might be cheaper too on top of that. And so we don't like that. It puts us as a brick and mortar, puts us as a disadvantage. Well, if this was really about fairness, they didn't seem to want to have the conversation. Okay, if we change this law, we're going to collect it. If we, you know, we're not establishing a new tax, we're just ensuring this tax is being collected. We're going to collect an extra $60 million is their estimate. If this is really about fairness, they should have lowered other taxes by $60 million so it was revenue neutral. But it's really not. They can argue all they want it's about fairness, but their actions don't demonstrate it's about fairness. It's about collecting an extra $60 million from the public, and eventually maybe hundreds of millions of dollars more, what they believe is out there. So Supreme Court has thrown this to the Congress and to the states, and it's a very complicated issue when you start talking about the nexus. But the bottom line, it means, again, they're going to be collecting more money from you, the public.
I had a comment and a question. I understand this would not have passed without the Republican leadership relying on Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
We we need Republican leadership that will be willing to abide by the Hastert rule, because then stuff like this, like the Medicaid expansion, doesn't get passed. But my question is, so in about 2 months, at the height of our perpetual pothole season, we're going to have to vote on this. You had mentioned that there are many legislators working on ideas on how to fund our road improvements without raising taxes. Are they going to coalesce around a plan relatively soon that we can get out there and say, hey, there is another solid plan that's ready to go, so that people will say at the height of pothole season, I can vote no on this because I know that waiting in the wings is legislation that will fix the roads without raising taxes?
Leadership, the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader have endorsed this proposal and they want it to pass. There's not going to be any organized effort to let the public know that there's an alternative. There will be individual legislators and ad hoc work groups that will come together to work on a solution. State Senator Pat Colbeck from Livonia has already gone on Paul W. Smith and Frank Beckman, and he has morninginmichigan.com, I believe. He has like 4 different plans, one of them being the Speaker Bolger plan. Word around Lansing is the plan that passed the House in December will be a starting point for many legislators because it does get the necessary funds to roads without cutting education or local government and without raising taxes, and forcing that Michigan public to rearrange their budgets. So people that want a yes vote they want to say that this is your last chance. I mean, they're using fear tactics. They're using fear tactics. They're saying this is our last chance to fix the roads. So we need to vote yes. This is the best we can do. They're saying people are going to die. That's a little off topic from your question, but actually deaths are down drastically over the past 10 years, almost 20%. One death is one too many. So to answer your question, there will be many proposals out there. I understand, like Gary Glenn, I understand he may introduce as soon as this week a proposal, the Bolger plan. There's other legislators. There's even some Democrats looking at other states' best practices. And so there's going to be a lot of different proposals out there. And eventually there could be a small tax increase, maybe 3-5 cents a gallon. You know, I think the road lobby got really greedy. I think if 5-6 years ago they said, let's just increase the gas tax maybe 3 to 5 cents in January, maybe again the next January. Now granted, I would have been opposed to that because I know the money's in the budget. But they almost said, we want more or we want nothing. We want 1.5 to 2 billion. And get this, the County Road Association just held a meeting and they surveyed their members and they said, even if this passes, they'll be $1 billion short, so they'll still have to come at voters to ask for local property tax millage increases for additional money for the roads. So even if this is voted yes, you're still going to see local requests for increase in property taxes. So, sort of to your question, when I talk to people, I talk about what it means to them individually, all the spending that's left on the table and how the budget's growing faster than rate of inflation, and that there's a credible plan out there. It's not me, some right-wing wacko, saying that there's a credible plan. It's the Speaker of the House, who was Speaker for 4 years, that put a plan up, defended it in a letter to the Detroit Free Press on December 12th, and received 56 votes from members of the House that voted yes for this plan. So there is a credible plan that was there. Even if there was even a credible plan in the Senate, although it raised taxes, albeit 40% less higher than this plan.
Just a quick question. I actually have 2. One of them is, do you have pens available here with you tonight?
Yes, we have pens. If you want a pen, they're free.
Okay.
They might be right out there, I believe.
And my second question is, you know, it's simple. I've read that out of the whole country, Michigan is number 33 for what they spend on roads out of the whole country. And they have something like 10% more that they spend on at the pumps for this tax. Just those simple facts alone would make you wonder, wouldn't it? Where's this? Why aren't we spending more money on roads if 33% of or 33 other states are spending more for their roads?
Well, part of this was Proposal A. 40% of the money you spend at the pump now doesn't even go to roads because the sales tax doesn't go to roads. When we have high gas prices, we have the 4th highest gas tax on gasoline in the country because the sales tax. As the price goes up, you pay more. Now we probably have about 8th or 9th highest tax on gasoline because gas prices are low. So yeah, very little. We're one of the lower states in what we're spending in roads, but we're one of the highest states in the taxes that we pay at the pump. And this is definitely a problem that needs to be fixed. They claim they do sort of fix that in this proposal, but they're letting education spending continue to grow faster than the rate of inflation. Basically, they're saying all of you need to rearrange your budget so state government doesn't have to. And I don't know about you, but I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Our budgets, people's budgets, have not been growing at the rate of inflation. Your buying power has been going down. State government's been going up. It is a problem here in Michigan. It needs to be solved. Part of the other problem is, like, when you talk about prevailing wage, about $200 million they can save in prevailing wage is on school construction projects. So if you pass that and you save them $200 million, and then you put $200 million in the roads, they say, well, you're cutting education. Well, no, it's just like in your house. If you insulate and you spend less on the heat bill, you say, well, you're spending less on heating and keeping your family warm. Well, yeah, I am, because I'm being more efficient with my dollars. I'm still providing them the same service, but that frees up my dollars so I can do something else. Unfortunately, we need politicians and elected officials in Lansing to be able to make these changes and be articulate and go out and make the case. Sure, we might be spending a little bit less on education. We're still spending the rate of inflation on education, but the dollar is going this much further because we did X, Y, and Z. So the easy way out for them is just to go to you, because they fear you less than the special interests. So this is your opportunity to vote no and send a message to special interests that no, we're not buying this. We're not paying a ransom to special interests so we can get our roads fixed. You need to go back to the drawing board. You have a new leader of the Senate, a new leader in the House. You have many new members due to term limits. You need to go back to the drawing board. There's credible proposals out there, and fix our roads. So, great. Thank you.